providers.
Good afternoon, listeners. I'm your host, George Cadman. This is Talk of the Bay on KSQD 90.7 FM. As part of our ongoing coverage of Pride Month, we're joined in the studio today by Nora Urena of RCFam, a community collective for families in South County, but also serving the Tri-County area. Frankie Farr of the Neighbors Pub, an LGBTQ centric, socially responsible cafe and community space coming soon to Santa Cruz, and Jorge Guillen, who currently sits as an active member of the Pajaro Valley Pride board and is one of its founding members. And we're going to be talking about the amazing work of these organizations. Later in the show, or whenever it comes up, we're also going to be talking about the transphobic letter to the editor that appeared last month in the Good Times. I don't want that to overshadow the amazing work of these organizations and individuals, but it will definitely come up. So, and this is going to be a call-in show, and just so you can jot the number down now, it's 831-900-5773. That's 831-900-5773. So I want to start with Nora Urena. She is a mother of 6 and a community activist with degrees in family sciences and ethnic studies. For nearly 20 years, she has been empowering families in a variety of ways to be the parent and person they strive to be. She and her husband, Ricardo, along with many community leaders, created the RCFam Collective. They are a hub for families to gather and for local organizations and providers to offer their services. Coming from a multicultural background and raising a biracial family, it was important to Nora to be intentional about creating this space, RCFam, from culture to language to self-expression to access. The center is a space where all people can raise their children together. Hi, Nora.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you for joining me. Can you tell me a little bit about RCFam and the work that you do?
Sure. We are a multicultural family center, really to bring families to a centralized location for the local organizations that have existed for a long time, new organizations, small scale providers, to get to where the families already are, as opposed to the ongoing system, which is families being ping-ponged all over the Tri-County area.
Okay, so you're located in Watsonville. You have a physical office and location in Watsonville, but you're serving San Benito, Monterey, and Santa Cruz counties?
Yeah, that's correct. So the in-between Monterey and Santa Cruz, and in between Salinas and Watsonville, I call them support deserts, where, Castroville, Pajaro, Watsonville, Aromas really are just neglected and ignored, and that is why they're underserved. The ability to access care is, for many, unobtainable.
So neglected and ignored specifically in the areas of healthcare or service. What kinds of services?
So things like speech therapy, for instance, is a very specific one. To find a speech therapist for your young child that can speak English and Spanish and provide that speech therapy in both languages or just in Spanish is not accessible to everybody. So many families need to travel as far as Monterey to receive that. Fun activities like gymnastics are inaccessible as well, where we have to travel significantly further to get to these activities. Representation is also really limited. So for, speaking of this topic, our LGBTQ families really don't have support in this desert area. support desert area.
So you envisioned, you and another woman co-founded RCFam, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you opened in October of last year, right?
Right. This has kind of been building in my brain for over a decade of being a professional serving the area and also being a mother, needing the services in the area and knowing what I needed and still being unable to access it.
So this is a vision that's been developing over a decade, and you just opened your doors in October of last year.
Mm-hmm.
And remind me of the other woman who co-founded it.
Oh, Juliana Reyes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some of I understand this is a project that is still growing. This is in the early stages. And when I was looking at your website, I was thinking, I'm going to go there. I'm going to just show up. I'm going to walk in. I'm going to say, hi, Nora. And I was looking at your website and I realized there doesn't seem to be open hours right now. So maybe you can talk about, there is a physical location for the center in Watsonville that's on your website, which I think is rcfam.org, right? So
rcfam.com.
.com.
The org was taken.
Okay. So it doesn't appear that you have open hours currently. Is that something you're working toward?
We do. We're open daily.
Oh.
And then weekends is by event or by appointment.
Okay.
What the tough spot in right now is having a dedicated full staff. So it's entirely run by my family and volunteers.
Okay. What are the hours, Monday through Friday?
Monday through Friday, generally, you can say 10 to 4. But we have classes or groups happening before 10, and we have other offerings happening in the evenings.
Okay.
What is I call open center is just a drop-in play space for families to. I like to call it an interior park that serves coffee and Wi-Fi.
Nice.
And then families have access to lactation services, parenting education. All of the toys, art supplies, everything is accessible there. We have a library of baby carriers and a team to help with that. We have car seat technician to help install your car seats.
Mm-hmm. And you have on your website a whole section dedicated to LGBTQ plus issues and activities. Is that right?
Yes, we have a lot of stuff going on the website. The other vision that I had was as a collective of organizations to come together to serve the families. It's also, I really wanted to have a physical space for families to see what resources are here. So we have 211 in each county. But even that is really difficult to navigate sometimes.
It's like 911 except for just information
resources,
for services. Yeah.
And I mean, trying to Google what's in the area is also really exhausting. And it just leads you to frustration is what I found. And so we do get a lot of calls from families who say, I've called this person. They tell me to call here. And they're just, so I said, ping pong. So we get them directly to who they need to speak to.
I see. So in a sense, beyond the community center and family center that you are, you're also a hub for people to turn to get these to help them, point them in the direction of these other resources.
Yes,
and maybe even
exactly.
to bring some of these resources to them at the center.
Yes, exactly. And with that, it, it's a pretty lofty goal of mine. So what I'm seeing is a need for help in keeping all of those resources updated. I made the website. Me, a couple of friends. Good. So it really needs to be continuously updated. But one thing that's really important to me is that the social media, the website, everything out there isn't just my voice, isn't just my husband's voice, isn't just Juliana's voice when she's able to be part of it, because she's focusing on her community in Santa Cruz now. Where her family lives. So it matters that the voices of our community are heard. And so, yes, I can direct to where things are, but also really wanting to lean on those who are the community leaders of these different pockets of the community.
And can you tell us the physical address for folks who might want to check you out during your hours of 10 to 4, Monday through Friday, or for some of the other events that are taking place outside of those hours?
Sure. It's 1205 Freedom Boulevard in Watsonville, and the suite number is 3B.
Awesome. 1205 Freedom Boulevard, suite number 3B. And RCFam is open Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., but there's activities that go on both before and after those open hours. Now, I'll just tell listeners, again, you're listening to Talk of the Bay. My name is George Cadman, and today I'm joined by 3 guests in the studio. And we just heard from our first guest, Nora Urena from RCFam. And I'll just mention that one of the reasons that I have these 3 guests on the show today is that there was a really awful, hateful, transphobic letter in the Good Times a few weeks ago. And I'll just, granted they've apologized several times, and there's been some letters to the editor, striking back against that have appeared in the paper. But it was kind of the seed for this show. And what led me to invite Nora partly was that I want to make sure that the community knows about RCFam, because it's a great organization, but also that this kind of came to be because there was a drag story time in May that there was some fallout around this letter to the editor that appeared before the event. And so we're going to talk about that as well. But I didn't want that to be the focus of the show. I also want to talk about the amazing work going on. So I'm going to bring in my second and then third guest now. So Frankie Farr is also joining us in the studio today. They are an activist and the founder of the Neighbors Pub, which is a queer cafe and pub that is going to be opening in Santa Cruz soon. Frankie moved here from the city of Good Neighbors, Buffalo, New York in 2015 to pursue a career in conservation. In the midst, they noticed the lack of a central queer space in Santa Cruz, and they are on a mission to fix that, all while giving back to conservation efforts and BIPOC and LGBTQ plus and other marginalized communities. Hi, Frankie.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us today. I really want to hear more about the pub, but I want to bring Jorge Guillen in as well. He currently sits as an active member of the Pajaro Valley Pride board and is one of its founding members. Until last year, Jorge served as the organization's president, and since stepping down has been more involved in the entertainment aspect of the organization's events. Through the art of drag, Jorge transforms into Zanistra and often hosts many of the organization's events. And I believe, Jorge, you were Zanistra at Drag Time Story Hour in May, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you for joining us as well.
Thank you for having me. I
appreciate it. So, Frankie, let's jump back to you for 1 second. Can you tell us about the Neighbors Pub? It's currently, where are you at in the stages? Because at first it was like, oh, it's a place, and then it was like, it's a concept, but it's somewhere in between a place and a concept, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So right now I do a lot of pop-up events, and all of them are fundraisers for the pub, because we all know it takes a lot of money to do anything around here, and it definitely takes a lot of money to secure a space and to actually open up a full functioning business and to have it last long too, to have it really be sustainable. So right now I do a ton of pop-up events. I do everything from drag shows to brunches to burlesque brunches to helping others with their events and just having like a little corner of it. I also do like these really big queer markets that are just awesome and bring in a ton of different organizations and vendors and local artists, and it's lovely. And I honestly just can't wait for it to be a permanent space, because one event a week is honestly not enough. So,
and once you've raised the funds and secured a location for the pub, is it going to be a for-profit business venture? Is it going to be a nonprofit organization? Is it going to be, what is the vision for that?
So legally it will be considered a for-profit business, but I will be giving away most of the profits, or like do a kind of like growing donation. Again, just trying to maintain a sustainable model. But most of the profits will be given away to conservation, like always.
And when you say conservation, could you give me an example of what that means?
That might be going towards like different organizations that already exist.
Okay.
Eventually, I also want to have a wildlife sanctuary, and so there'll also be a funding point for that. A lot of my background in conservation and my ideal studies with that is megafauna, so tigers, like big things. And they eat a lot. And I'm not trying to feed them horrible food. And really just trying to, help get them out of
I'm
captivity.
envisioning the neighbor's pub next door to RCFam with the tiger, the wildlife sanctuary next to that, and Zanistra coming in and doing a drag time story hour with the children and the tigers and children's books and balloons. And
Hear me out. Somebody has requested goat yoga quite a few times.
oh,
I envision Zanistra riding in on a tiger for drag story time. I don't know.
that would be pretty amazing.
I'm going to say no to that. But
the kids would love it. Come on.
People have also asked me for bar yoga, so we could probably collab. That'd be fun. So anyway, so a big portion of the profits will always go towards conservation work. And again, it can be either a mix of like an organization that I may eventually own or run, or ones that already exist that are already doing really good work. And then a portion will also be reinvested into our local communities, especially into LGBTQ community organizations and just directly people and BIPOC people and organizations, and other marginalized people as well.
And how can people get involved with helping you? Because I'm imagining this isn't something you're doing by yourself. Like, this is a group effort, correct?
It's a little column A, a little column B. So I am technically the only employee, unless you want to count my cats in that. But, they don't really help much.
Little tigers.
They just try to get me to stop working on the computer all day. But I have like a ton of other people that I work with that help me with the events and stuff. So it's a little bit of both.
And if people wanted to get involved, they wanted to find out more about it, they want to, perhaps lend a hand, would they go to you on social media like Instagram, Facebook? Where do they find you? Neighbors Pub?
Just find me running around mostly. They can go to theneighborspub.org.
Okay.
.com was taken from me. Or the Neighbors Pub on all social media. I've
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that.
Of it. Yeah, I've tried to keep it all consistent.
And then you have an event coming up, right? A fundraiser?
Yeah.
Do you want to plug that?
There's Big Gay Trivia. It's coming up on Sunday, June 18th at 7 p.m. And the details will be posted on the website. If they're not already up, they'll be up this week.
Again, the website is theneighborspub.org.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Frankie. I want to remind listeners you're listening to Talk of the Bay here at 90.7 FM, and we're going to be opening up the phone lines in about 12 minutes or so, around 5:30, and that number is 831-900-5773. You can call in with a question for any one of my three guests. You could call in with a comment. We're also going to be touching on this letter to the editor momentarily that appeared in the Good Times a few weeks ago, and kind of what has happened as a result of that letter, both bad and good. But I want to bring in my third guest, Jorge Guillen, who also, as we mentioned, transforms into Zanistra and hosts many of Pajaro Valley Pride's events, and joined in the RCFam's drag story time that took place in May. Hello, Jorge.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining all of us here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. So I have to honestly tell you, I'm not sure how to bring you in. So if there's something that you want to say, like the drag story time, how did you get involved with that? Did someone contact you, or were you already in touch with RCFam? How did you?
Yeah, I got involved through Jen Salinas Holz, who is a friend, a community member, and also in contact with Nora, and so she approached me about this event, and that was like just for me like a brand new, unique experience.
You hadn't done a drag story time before?
No. Okay. And that was kind of a big, it is a big deal. It was a big deal to me. It was a big opportunity to bring drag in a way that's also like promoting like literature, and it's also promoting like a sense of understanding. Like one thing that like I saw in this is being able to give representation to queer people through literature. That's something that I didn't have as a kid. Like I think a lot of queer people didn't have any of that as growing up, and like it's so important to have that kind of representation for like kids to see themselves
in their books.
In their books, and like not having that and like being able to be that person was kind of like a big deal to me. And so
nice.
I jumped right in. As soon as it was asked, I was like, that's a yes.
And it was you and one other performer, right? Rogue Roulette,
yes.
Rogue Roulette, who did the drag story time. I have not been to a drag story time. I don't have kids.
You are missing out.
You don't have to be a kid or have kids. Like
I've seen pictures and I've heard stories, from across the nation, including ridiculous backlash to it, but I haven't actually been. So can you describe how the event, how it went for those of us who haven't been to one of a drag story hour or drag story time?
Sure. So the event itself was awesome. I think one of my favorite parts of the event itself was getting to do something that I've never done before in front of anybody, which is like get into makeup. It's a whole process. It takes a couple of hours to do that. And so there was this idea of having families and parents and their kids kind of like watch us put on makeup and transform into our characters, and they got to like saw us put on our makeup and go through the transformation, and just like really curious eyes and questions, not just about drag but just about like being queer and what it means, like how do we know, and all those like kind of.
They ask you questions while you were getting into makeup. Okay.
Yeah, so there was a level of interaction that I've not done before as far as like getting prepared for it. It's just usually me and the cats. And so that was kind of a unique experience, and I really appreciated that. Like again, same thing, like not having representation as a kid, and then like being able to be that for somebody else just means a lot to me. Like I wish I would have had that. I wish there was drag story time when I was a kid, and being read stories that like made me feel seen, or maybe even just find ways to articulate like internal feelings. Like as kids, like our vocabulary is so limited, our experience is so limited, so how do we like make sense of what's going on inside? Like I knew I was a queer kid since I was very young, but I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what the word gay was, but there was just something like in me that like just was different. And so like if I had seen literature or media or just anything that kind of like helped me understand that, like I would have come out a lot sooner and would have like avoided a lot of pain and suffering. So it's maybe felt
less alone.
Exactly.
And had some guidance.
Yes.
Perhaps from, folks who went there before you.
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
And even being able to communicate that to my family. My I grew up in a like Catholic household. My parents are still like practicing Catholics. I'm not. I just moved away from it. But that's, if I had the vocabulary then, I would have been able to like maybe come out to them sooner, or just been able to like express myself differently with them, and I think things would have been a little bit better. Not saying I have any complaints now, like it's giving me life experience, but that's not to say that like young kids should live in that kind of like closet and like that kind of hiding feelings, or not sure what to do, or like having like suicidal thoughts, or like just all those different things that like, yes, I'm admitting on the radio I had as growing up, but they're real thoughts that
I'm sure you're not alone, and by sharing those things with other people, then they can go, oh wow, I'm not alone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to be a child, to be given that freedom is what meant everything to me as a mother who, I have 6 kids. I'm bound to have a child who like the world doesn't want to exist. And for these children to see like not only yes I can exist, but I can look good doing it, and all these people love me. Like there's this community that was presented that hey guys, we are here and we all love all of you exactly as you are.
Yes,
it was more than a story time. It really was.
Yes, agreed.
Let's talk a little bit more about Drag Story Time that took place in May. Again, I'm going to remind listeners you're listening to Talk of the Bay on 90.7 FM KSQD. We're going to be opening up the phone lines in about 5 minutes to callers, 831-900-5773 if you want to call in with a question or a comment. And that in probably about 5:30 we'll open the phone lines up. You just heard the voices of Nora Urena. She, again, is the co-founder of RCFam, which is located in Watsonville. It's a hub for families to gather and for local organizations and providers to offer their services. And it is located in Watsonville, but but is serving the Tri-County area. Also, Jorge Guillen, who is an active member of the Pajaro Valley Pride Board and transforms into Zanistra to host many of that organization's events. And also Frankie Farr, they are an activist and founder of the Neighbors Pub, which is an up-and-coming queer cafe and pub that's going to be opening in Santa Cruz. Now I'm thinking, gosh, I should have done 3 shows. But anyhow, let's return to the drag story time, which is what kind of, in a way, brought you 3 together here in the station with me. Is that I'll just say I had been out of town and I came home, and my one of my friends handed me the Good Times, like, read this letter, and my jaw hit the floor. I was like, I cannot believe how hateful and transphobic. I couldn't believe it was in the paper. Now it turns out it was according to the publisher of the Good Times, Dan Pulcrado, it was an accident. It fell through the crack. It was someone dropped the ball, quote unquote. It was this interim editor, I guess. I'm not sure of all the details, but they've since published some apologies, some letters to the editor that are kind of fighting back against that kind of hatred. And I believe you, Jorge, were co-authored a letter with Zach Keith, or Rogue Roulette, that appeared in the Good Times this past week. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Correct.
Yes. So they published a whole Pride paper and everything. So there is a real effort to try to rectify this that happened. It was an anonymous letter, which added to the problem, I think, because this person just spewed hate, and then it was just anonymous. It's like, how do we even know this person is real? I mean, I asked the editor, the owner, how do we know this person is real? It could be a right-wing organization that crafted this thing, and it's not even a person. They're in Texas or Arkansas. They're not even from Santa Cruz. And he assured me it was someone in the area, but we don't know. The bottom line is there was an anonymous letter in the Good Times, very hateful. I'm sure many of our listeners have read it. Even if you're not someone who's particularly active in the community, you've probably picked up the Good Times and seen this letter. So I guess in the few minutes we have before we open the phones, if each one of you could just talk a little bit about, you don't have to go into detail about the letter, but just like, what do you think the aftermath of that letter was? And for you, I think, Nora, and for Drag Storytime, I believe there was a very immediate consequence in that you had some protesters who came. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that. In either one of you, either Nora or Jorge can begin.
Sure. So I didn't see the protesters. I didn't go out. I was getting ready, but I know they were there. I saw pictures. I know that there was a sense of like fear from some of the people attending. I know some of the kids were asking if they had to worry about people bringing guns.
Oh no!
You know, those are like very real thoughts, because kids they're observant. They see what's going on in the media, and like they know it's not something that like can happen in our community. So they're paying attention. And so I myself had my moment of panic in the morning. I was like, am I going to be safe? Is this safe? You know, those were like my immediate thoughts after reading.
Because you knew about this letter.
I hadn't read it until that morning.
Oh wow.
and so it was definitely like anxiety inducing, and I just had all these different like just fears for my safety. But like fortunately, like our community really like stepped up and like showed up and made the event feel safe. The parking lot was full of just other community members saying, no, we're not going to have this. Some of the wording or some of the letter or phrases on their boards or whatever, they were pretty homophobic too, and they were repeating some of the same stuff that were on the letter, you know. So it's like they made it feel at one point unsafe, and like I don't think some people really understand the severity of the letter. Somebody might read it and overlook like the ramifications of it, like especially in our political climate where there's over 450 like pieces of legislation across the country that are targeting trans folks and like drag performers, and it's like it's in our community too, you know. So it's so that publishing that kind of letter just kind of invites more of that, and it legitimizes that kind of rhetoric, and it's just a dangerous thing.
And it appeared before the event to top it off. So then people who didn't even, you know, people who were opposed to the event or opposed to, that are kind of among that mindset, were organized in advance to come and protest it, when otherwise maybe they wouldn't have even been aware it was occurring, and it certainly wouldn't have been presented in such a hateful manner.
Yeah.
Jen Salinas Holtz and I, we met with another volunteer for the center, and we had to discuss in advance, should we publicize this event? And we made the conscious decision not to publicize the event outside of just on our website and a couple social media posts. We purposely didn't publicize with the local news because of this. We didn't know how it was going to be received. We did know it was important to have the event. We were dedicated to that because of the political climate. We needed to take a stand. And I viewed that letter as an invitation to cause harm. It was an invitation to attack a children's event. It's not just an opinion anymore. Not in this country, not right now. It was an invitation to attack children.
Yeah, it certainly read that way to me as well. Frankie, did you have any thoughts that you wanted to toss in on this conversation? You don't have to.
I have so many thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think I found out about the event like a few days before, just because my friends were involved through Pajaro Valley Pride. And the morning of, I got a message from a different friend who was like, "Hey, are you going to make a statement about this?" And I was like, "What?" And so I Google it right away, and my heart started pounding out of my chest. Like, I swear I could see it like coming up. It was just so, I don't even know. Like, there was like a lot of anxiety and fear, and then I was just honestly outraged that they were attacking like a children's event, and like, and of course I'm like mad that they're attacking drag too, but I'm like, come on, like, if you're going to keep saying these things like protect the children, why are you directly posting exactly where it's going to be and allowing an anonymous letter not just to be published online, but also to be published? Like, they spent money printing it. Like, that's a lot. And then not only that, but they also posted it on their Facebook, but like, it seemed almost deliberately not posting on Instagram, which Instagram does tend to be a little bit more left-leaning versus Facebook tends to be a little bit more right-leaning. So like, they kind of knew what they were doing. There's no way that it was just one person involved in writing that and publishing it. Like, you know, people had to have seen it. That I don't know how it could have, like, quote unquote, slipped through the cracks. Like, that's too many eyes probably saw it before it actually happened.
Well, just to let listeners know, we will be having on the radio in 2 weeks on June 22nd at 5 o'clock on Talk of the Bay. I'll be hosting a show. I'm going to have Dan Pucrato, who's the owner publisher of The Good Times, in the station, as well as Brad Cava, who's the interim editor now, not the one who was there when this letter was published, as well as Zach Keith, or Rogue Roulette, is going to be a part of that. So we're going to have 3 guests in here, and I encourage people to listen into that show and call into that show as well, because that will be a call-in show and an opportunity for people to talk directly to Dan about what happened, since he was, you know, at the helm when this occurred. I know he was out of the country, but he was still at the helm. So I just want to let people know about that in advance, June 22nd. You're listening to Talk of the Bay here at 90.7 FM KSQD. We're opening the phone lines up now. If you have a question for any of my guests, I'm joined in the studio right now by Nora Urena, again with RCFam in Watsonville, a hub for families to gather and for local organizations and providers to offer their services. They're located in Watsonville, but they serve the Tri-County area. Jorge Guillen, or Zanistra, who is an active member of Pajaro Valley Pride. Until last year, he served as their president. And since stepping down, he's been more involved in the entertainment aspect of their events and often transforms into Zanistra for their events, and was participating in the drag story time that we were just discussing. And then Frankie Farr, they're an activist and founder of the Neighbors Pub, which is a queer cafe and pub that's opening in Santa Cruz soon. We hope. They don't have a physical location yet, but have raised funds through fundraisers and have a presence on social media and a website, which will at the end give you an opportunity for everyone to give out their information so that people can jot that down. So be prepared if you want to know websites and other information. We'll give each guest an opportunity to share that at the end of the show. So anyway, again, 831-900-5773. If you have a question for any one of my guests or all of my guests. We have Jen on line 1. Hello, Jen.
Hello.
Hi. Do you have a question?
Me?
Yes,
Hi.
I can. Thank you for calling.
Thank you for doing this. I'm Jen Salina Holtz. I'm one of the organizers of this event, and I really appreciate
co-founder of
RCFam,
perhaps?
No, not
a different Jen. Okay.
Highly involved. No, Jen co-organized. Well, she organized the Drag Story Hour.
Oh, okay, great. So, what was your?
Thank you so much for doing this.
Of course.
Well, I wasn't able to be there with you. I'm actually out of town right now with Nora's partner and child and my child. We just got off a plane. So,
and you're listening. That's great.
We're listening. Yes, we're on an airport shuttle.
Okay.
I just wanted to give you. I think you've gotten a lot of context of our event, but first of all, thank you so much for having us and highlighting this.
Of course.
And we really appreciate the community conversation that's been happening around all of this. I think it definitely speaks to the need for representation and showing positivity to our community about events like this and support for LGBTQ plus kids. Mm-hmm. I work with LGBTQ plus elementary and middle school students in several local schools. I have the great honor of being a Gay Straight Alliance advisor for several middle and elementary schools. So the reason we had this event in the first place is my elementary school students asked for it. We were organizing another drag event for middle school, and the elementary school kids said, "Hey, we want that too." So I contacted Jorge and Zach, and we got the ball rolling. And of course, safety was on our mind the whole time. But as soon as I asked Nora, "Can we do this at your center?" it was 100% yes, enthusiastically yes.
That's wonderful.
We have a beautiful community in Watsonville, so this is just the kind of thing that organically comes together, and I just love that about Watsonville. But we were very, very intentional about safety. So obviously we know that drag storytime events have come under attack in other parts of the country over the last couple of years. So we did a lot of planning. We made sure that we had a team of volunteers. We called them the Rainbow Defense Coalition, and we wanted to make sure that nobody would feel unsafe at our event. So I think we accomplished that goal, because I heard Jorge say that the people inside the event didn't even see the protesters. So our goal was to basically make a barrier of rainbow positivity between anything negative that was happening outside. And we also were very sensitive to the fact that people were scrutinizing our event, especially after the letter was published. So we made sure that there were always at least 2 parents in the room with the drag artists at all times, who were either school district employees or fingerprinted and cleared as volunteers with the school district. Mm-hmm. We just wanted to make sure nobody would have any reason to say that something inappropriate had happened. So we were very transparent. We also had a documentary film crew there from UCSC. So the whole event was filmed and photographed, and we're really looking forward to sharing the film with everyone. Hopefully it will be part of the Watsonville Film Festival next year. But we just, definitely because of the letter, but we had already been planning this ahead of time, we were just very careful to make sure that everybody would be safe. And it was a hard conversation to have, but we also talked about what we would do if violence happened. We had an evacuation plan. We had we just planned for everything. So when we found out about the letter in the Good Times the night before the event, there was a moment of, oh no, what's going to happen? And then really right away I thought, we've got this. This is fine. Our community's prepared for this. We are ready. We have so much positivity. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody in Watsonville and the Santa Cruz County area who showed up and who was there for us and who was there really to protect our kids and keep this event positive and safe.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you for calling. I just, one thought that crossed my mind when you were speaking, I'm really glad that despite this hate-filled letter that you were able to, create as much of a safe space as you could, even in the aftermath with the protesters showing up and all of that, to kind of insulate people who were attending the event to some degree from it. At one point you said something about having, volunteers from the school district background checked, and also having this film crew and everything. One thing you mentioned was, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought I heard you say something along the lines of you had eyes on the event, like there was an attempt to be transparent so that there could be no legitimate accusation that anything inappropriate had happened.
Exactly.
And it makes me just cringe a little bit, not because of what you're saying, but just this notion that drag story time or drag story hour is somehow potentially like a naughty, dirty thing or something. And that idea is so wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it makes me a little bit sad that anyone had to even think that there might be an accusation along those lines, and then that you would have to consider that.
Yep. Well, I'm a queer person. I'm a parent. My kids are 12 and 15, and my younger son is best friends with Nora's child. So we, both Nora and I have talked about things that we wished had existed in Watsonville when our older kids were babies. So that's sort of one of the reasons we did this event, is to provide something that we would have liked to have gone to when our bigger kids were little. And just as for me as a queer parent, I felt very embraced in Watsonville, but you always have to be a little bit concerned about, what people are going to say, what people think, who might be unsafe for our family, and also for myself as an openly queer person working in elementary schools. It's always in the back of my mind that, for instance, when we have our Gay Straight Alliance Club meetings, I always have another adult there. I know that I am not doing anything inappropriate, but I just don't want to give anybody any chance to insinuate something like that. And yes, it is wrong that we always have to be aware of that.
That's a burden that you shouldn't have to bear, because it's totally misinformation. Frank, excuse me. Thank you so much for your call, Jen. We're going to open the lines up. We have a number of other callers waiting to speak, but I appreciate your call. Thank you. And then Jorge, you had something you wanted to say.
I did. Yeah, just kind of running off on those same thoughts. The one thing that really made me, I guess, cringe too is like the how disrespectful, or maybe it's disrespectful to some degree, but also there's this like notion that misunderstanding that drag artists don't know how to read their audience. Like as artists, we know how to tailor our craft for our audiences, and I'm not gonna put on an outfit or a number or something right. that I would do at a specifically adult event,
at a club.
Exactly,
adult
at a club. Like I it's ridiculous. It's just like I know as an artist how to tailor my craft, like how to put something together that's going to be appropriate. And so I just had that thought, and I think people don't understand that, maybe that aren't even aware or familiar with what drag is. I think they just have a very like narrow understanding of what it could be. And so they think that I was like, they're gonna bring in a character that shows up in a nightclub, and it's like no, that's not what's gonna happen here. So like just one follow.
Thank you for that, Jorge. I appreciate it. We have another caller online too. I don't know the name. I didn't get to catch the name. Can we bring them on? Hello, you're on the air. Caller?
I am on the air.
Yes, you are. Please introduce yourself. I was handed a note that you were there, but with no name.
I'm definitely not anonymous. My name is Leslie Reed Harrison, and I am the secretary of Pajaro Valley Pride. And I was actually at this event, and I was one of a part of the security detail at the event, because we did have a few people show up with signs that made mention of groomers. So, we wanted to make sure that people coming to the event were welcomed into the event and didn't feel intimidated or felt like that they couldn't participate in the event. And, I think, especially as mentioned earlier, in this political time, for the good times. So I have a background in journalism, and there's always as a journalist, you always have a responsibility to your audience. And for the Good Times, and I've lived in this county for 30 years, to have them every year they do they promote the annual Santa Cruz Pride event, and for them to have published that letter with the comments that remained days after the event, including a biblical quote about large millstones being hung around people's necks.
These are comments that appeared online, just to be clear? On the website, the Good Times website?
They were comments made in response to the letter on the website.
On the Good Times website. Okay, just to be clear, because I didn't see the digital version. I only saw the paper. Go ahead, sorry.
Yes. And so the comments below the letter were just absolutely horrific, and really just completely inappropriate.
Kind of escalating the violent theme, it sounds like.
Exactly. I mean, absolutely escalating the violence. And, we have to remind ourselves, less than 2 weeks before the Dyke Trans March, Santa Cruz Pride event, where thousands of people show up in a very small space that potentially could have had all kinds of consequences, that letter should never have been published. And after they published a response, which was on May 23rd, I replied to that response, and I just said, it just seemed, and even the way they responded online.
The Good Times.
They had, so for example, it was in the editor's section on online version.
I remember I had to click in 4 different places on the website to even find the apology initially, until I told the owner that.
Exactly. Well, and not only that, but the way it was done was that there was a trans flag, a single sentence, then 3 or 4 paragraphs of the Good Times promoting all the awards that they had won. And then the apology was followed. And we have to remember, Kyle Rittenhouse drove 20 miles.
Kyle Rittenhouse is the individual who went to
and shot
in Wisconsin, right? Was it?
Yeah, it was in Kenosha, Wisconsin. So it was the Kenosha, Wisconsin mass shooting.
He killed 2 people and injured a third, correct?
Yes, that is correct. And I was involved in Santa Cruz during the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, and we had to contest with individuals who were definitely very right-leaning, for people who were, it's their constitutional right to stand with signs and protests. And these folks came in, they were part of the Watsonville community because I recognized them, and were very threatening. And so when I saw that letter and I saw the response, I immediately went back to 2020 and thought about the potential harm that the Good Times had potentially initiated. And to me, it was like, why did you do this? What was your motivation? Is it was it for clickbait? It just didn't seem like good journalism.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but that's a good question for Dan Pucrato when he comes on June 22nd, is how this all happened and what's been done to try to prevent it from ever happening again. And I know that there's been some communication between Dan and members of the community regarding this letter, and I know he feels just awful about it. So it's not to say that it excuses it happening, but I think just talking about how we can move forward, and I'd encourage you to listen on June 22nd as well, and to call in then, to call back then.
I will definitely call in, because my question to him as a publisher is, putting in Jorge and
Zach
and
Keith
and Zach's letter in response. Also, it wasn't where they had originally said they were going to publish it.
Oh,
and
it was supposed to appear somewhere outside the letters to the editor, somewhere else in the paper.
It was meant to, yes.
Okay.
And it just really felt performative. It's like, you do this every year, And what else are you going to do? What changes are you going to make within the structure of your organization? What kind of HR policies are you going to institute?
Those are great questions, and I'm really sorry to cut you off, Leslie, but I'm going to have to because we have other callers. But I really appreciate your call, Leslie Harrison from Pajaro Valley Pride. Thank you. Definitely listen in on the 22nd and call back. Thank you again. We have another caller, but before we bring that caller in, I'd like to just turn to Jorge again because I saw you nodding. You were Zanistra at the Drag Story Time. Yes. And I see you nodding that letter that you and Zach Keith or Rogue Roulette co-authored that appeared in the Good Times during this Pride 2023 edition this last week. We just heard Leslie saying that was supposed to appear elsewhere in the paper, not on the letters to the editor page. So I saw you nodding. What was that? That's
correct. So when Zach and I drafted this, first of all, they asked us to edit it down to 300 words or less. And we did. We spent a morning doing it together. And by the end of it, we were just not happy. It's like, this is wrong. This is not, this is a shell of our feelings.
Right. Why should you have to go to 100 words or less on something this big?
And so at that point, I was like, maybe I shouldn't get published then. Like, this just doesn't feel right. So it's like, let's submit the 600 words. Like, this is, this, what happened, this letter being published, the anonymous letter being published, like, I think it calls for this the situation of really considering publishing the full letter. And so our understanding was that I was going to be published as part of the Santa Cruz Pride spread. So it's going to have more visibility. And so when I
that didn't happen.
No, when I picked up the paper Tuesday morning, I was disappointed, like like that it didn't.
So you submitted a 600 word.
Yes.
You and Zach submitted a 600 word response or statement.
Yes.
And then that got cut down to this letter that appeared.
They published a full one, but they didn't publish it where they said that we're going to publish it.
Okay.
And then it was also kind of split. So it was half of it in one page. It was
the letters to the editor section. Yeah. You had to read one page and then skip up a couple pages past the horoscopes to get to the rest of the letter.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
So I was disappointed, but at that point I was like, I'm not going to invest too much of my energy. Not that it's not worth it, but like I also don't want to get consumed by it to the point that it's going to like mess with my mental health.
Yeah, I understand.
So it's like, I'm going to take a step back here, and like there's more people involved here. There's more community members involved here. And
thank you for writing that. Thank you to you and Zach for writing that. Really appreciate it. And I'm sorry that it didn't end up appearing in the paper where it would have been more prominent and one coherent piece on one page, I wanted to turn to you, Nora, before we take the caller, and just say, you mentioned that you were contacted by the Good Times after the letter and the fallout with the protesters, and this did result, even though there was a big effort and a largely successful effort to insulate children and families from this kind of hate and the protesters and everything. There were still some folks who were affected, no doubt. And you mentioned to me the other day that you were approached by the Good Times immediately after this whole thing blew up on them. They called you and said, I'll let you tell the rest of it. They wanted to send a photographer and a reporter out.
It was it sounded sincere, of an apology, a personal apology for what had happened, and clarifying that it wasn't meant to happen, and reassured me that he himself, Dan, is an ally.
So he called you personally?
He did. And he told me to save his number and that I could contact him, which I do appreciate. And I let him know that some of the conversations we were having as a group, and one of those being that, Good Times is in a position right now to really show who they really are, really like to show their integrity of, possibly being a platform for greater education around drag. That could be something really easy to do, especially with this upcoming issue. To leverage the Good Times resources for community events and for family events that we do, to invest in the Pajaro Valley Pride, to invest in more story time hours, to invest in the family center. But I didn't have exact request. We were collectively trying to decide what to do and what to say. But the next day, I was called by a reporter, and I forget that person's name.
From the Good Times.
Saying that he was told to do a feature on Raíces y Cariño. And it was just kind of strange because he had called like 3 different times in the span of an hour. And
almost desperate.
Yes, and left a text message and a voicemail. And I got back to him, and he sounded very frantic that he needed to get the story out. He needed to come by. And at first I agreed to talk to him, and then he said, no, we want to come. Actually, we were hoping to visit the center, and our photographer is here and ready.
And you said, hang on, I need to talk to some other people before we just dive right into that.
Yeah, and so I actually initially said, okay, and felt really icky about it, and then called him back and said, I don't think we're ready for this. I'd love for you to feature our family center because we're amazing, and this show was amazing. The story time was a huge success. It was super fun, and the kids were totally engaged, but yeah, we're not ready to just move on from this with a simple apology.
And how do you feel the Good Times has done since then? Have they made steps in the right direction?
I mean, saying I'm sorry and this was wrong is a good step, and I don't feel reassured that there's a policy in place to prevent this. I don't feel reassured that if somebody brought a weapon that day, that we would be having a conversation like this. This would be very different.
Yeah, true. So you're listening to Talk of the Bay. My name is George Cadman. I'm your host today. I'm assuming we have no time left for phone calls since I got a wrap-up signal. Is that correct? Or do we have time to take one more? One more? Okay, we're taking one call now. We have somebody on line 1. No name. Hello, caller.
Hello.
Can you share your thoughts in a minute or less, please? I'm sorry, but we're rounding to the end of the show here.
Hi, my name is Louise. I'm calling to thank you all so much for being on today. And my question is coming from some teenagers from across the country who are wondering how best to find mentorship in queer community in a safe space, whether that be in drag or performance or art. I know that's a big broad question.
This is a question for the guests? Yes? Can you repeat it one more time?
How best for teens to find queer communities through drag and performance and art and safe space across the community.
Okay. Awesome. I think what I'm going to do to wrap up the show, since we only have a few minutes, is give each of my guests an opportunity to not only say a bit about their organization and give their website, but answer that question. What's that?
A few seconds.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize that. I apologize. I'm being told we only have a few seconds. So then what does that mean? That I have to just say goodbye now? Wrap it up. Well, I was hoping that these folks could answer the question, but there's no time, I guess. There you go, Nora.
RCFam.com for the up-to-date calendar of what we're doing.
theneighborspub.org or the Neighbors Pub on all social media. Sometimes I do have events that are open all ages, so that might, provide some opportunity to meet some mentors or to see like a tabling booth from like Pajaro Valley Pride or another organization.
And Jorge,
PajaroValleyPride.org. We have a lot of our upcoming events on there, including Pajaro Valley Pride, August 20. June 18th, there's a fundraiser at Fruition Brewing in Watsonville. All our events are like all ages.
Pajaro Valley Pride. Okay, and I would like if at least one person can try to answer our caller's question, so I'm going to let Jorge in with that.
Yeah, so just visiting our site, emailing us or messaging us through our Instagram accounts, and that way we can connect people with the right groups. So we have a network of organizations that we're in touch with, and we can point folks in the right direction.
So reach out to Pajaro Valley Pride for those connections. Okay, great. Thank you so much to all of my guests for joining me today. And next week, 2 weeks from now, Dan Procrado, owner, publisher of Good Times, and Brad Kava, interim editor, as well as Rogue Roulette, a drag performer who participated in Drag Storytime. They will be joining me as my guest in 2 weeks on June 22nd. So tune in for that and call back. Thank you.